My name is Morgan Carter. I'm 32 years old, a licensed architect, one of the youngest project leads in Oregon to win a Civic Design Award before the age of 30. And until recently, I was the heir apparent to Carter and Sons, the architectural firm my father built and I helped modernize. But none of that matters now, because today I am no longer part of Carter and Sons. Not by resignation, not by mistake, but by erasure. The morning it happened, I walked into the building like I always did. Coffee in hand, blueprints under my arm, head already full of timelines and renderings. I tapped my keycard at the executive entrance. Nothing. The red light blinked once, then again. I tried twice more before I realized it wasn't a glitch. My badge had been disabled. I ran upstairs using the public elevator. My nameplate was gone. My desk cleared out. I opened my phone and there it was. An email from HR. Subject line, board restructure notice. One line. Effective immediately, Morgan Carter is no longer affiliated with Carter and Sons. No meeting, no explanation, no farewell. And the worst part? My father wasn't even there. He didn't have the courage to face me himself. He let an assistant deliver the blow. And as I stood there, stunned, clutching an empty inbox and watching Daniel Voss stroll past me, wearing my badge, sitting in my office chair, I realized this wasn't just a firing. This was an execution. Clean, corporate, silent. Daniel wasn't a stranger. I'd seen him once or twice. Never thought much of him. But that day, something in his smirk told me he had known. That this moment had been planned. That I had been out of the picture long before I'd ever seen that email. I'm not here to ask for pity. I'm not here to fix what's broken. Because something bigger shattered that day. Not my career, but my belief in legacy. I am Morgan Carter, and I was erased, silently, efficiently, without cause. But what they forgot, what they never understood, is that you can take someone's title, their office, even their name off the door. But you can't take what they've already built inside themselves. And if they think I'll fade into some footnote in the company newsletter, then they clearly picked the wrong woman to betray. They didn't even look me in the eye. Just a cold email. Subject line, board restructure notice. Morgan had arrived early that morning, like she always did. The streets of Portland were still slick with dew, and the office lights on the 20th floor had barely flickered on. She pushed her keycard into the scanner. Nothing. A red flash. A second try. Still nothing. Confused but not yet alarmed, she waved at the front desk. The receptionist gave her a stiff nod, eyes darting to the side, and pressed the manual unlock. Something felt off. The elevator ride was too quiet. Her heels clicked against the polished concrete as she stepped into the executive wing. Her nameplate was gone from the door. Her heart skipped. She pulled out her phone and there it was. The email. From hr@carteransons.com. Subject, board restructure notice. Timestamp, 7:02 a.m. Morgan Carter. This is to notify you that effective immediately. Your position as Chief Development Officer is dissolved under the board restructure agreement signed on March 1st. Your access to all company systems has been revoked. Please do not return to the premises. She reread it 3 times. Then once more. No salutation. No goodbye. No explanation. Just erasure. She turned, disoriented. Her office door swung open, not by her hand. Daniel Voss stepped out, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand, his other hand casually in his pocket. He glanced at her with a thin smile, then walked past without a word, as if she were the ghost in the hallway. Her office, her sanctuary, was already occupied. Her footsteps grew erratic. She stormed to the HR pod. I want to speak to someone. Now. The assistant barely glanced up. I'm instructed not to engage. This came from the upper board. What board? I sit on that board. Not anymore. Miss Carter Morgan stood still. She felt her world shrink, folding in like crumpled paper. Her breath caught in her throat. She dialed her father. Voicemail. She tried again. Declined. Through the smoked glass of the corner conference room, she saw him, Richard Carter, laughing. With Daniel. She raised her hand against the glass as if it could force the memory back inside. As if it could stop time, rewind it, fix what was broken. But it was done. She whispered, her voice barely audible but sharp with steel. You erased me like I was nothing. I will make sure the world remembers who I am. My mother once said, your father had another life before you. Pray it never walks into yours. The words returned to Morgan like a draft from under a closed door. Unwanted, cold, and persistent. She sat on the hardwood floor of her apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, their cardboard edges softening from age and neglect. Rain tapped the windows, relentless and rhythmic, a percussion of memory and doubt. She hadn't planned to go through the drawers that night. She only wanted a pen. But there, buried beneath unopened mail and faded receipts, was an envelope marked with the Carter Foundation's seal. Inside, a scholarship letter addressed to Daniel Voss. Full academic grant. It read, awarded for exceptional promise. Personally approved. Richard Carter. Her blood ran still. She sat, motionless, letting the words etch into her like frost on glass. Why would her father fund Daniel's education? Why hide it? The phone rang. Her mother? Morgan? The voice was careful. I found something, she said flatly. A letter. Dad sponsored Daniel. A pause too long to be innocent. That was years ago. Richard had obligations. Obligations? He helped a friend's child. Was that friend's name? Voss? Another pause. Then a sigh. You wouldn't understand. It was complicated. No, Morgan said, her voice sharpening. It's starting to make perfect sense. After the call, she wandered to her bookshelf and pulled an old family album. Near the back, tucked behind photos of company galas and ribbon cuttings, was a photo she hadn't noticed before. Daniel, maybe 16, in a suit too large for his shoulders. Standing beside Richard, both smiling, not politely, but warmly, like family. She remembered now. Daniel had been around during her teenage years, always just on the edge of the frame. At barbecues, fundraisers. She had thought he was someone's cousin, a stray +1. But now, her phone buzzed again. Dean Novak. I heard what happened, he said without preamble. I'm fine, she lied. No, you're not. But that's not the point. You can either stay angry or get smart. I don't know what I'm looking at. You're looking at the truth. People don't just show up at the top. They're lifted, groomed, while others are pushed aside. She closed her eyes. He was never just a colleague. He's connected. Dean was silent a beat. Then, so ask yourself, how deep does it go? The rain outside softened. Morgan opened her laptop and typed, Daniel Voss birth certificate. Her fingers trembled. The page loaded slowly, a spinning wheel of dread. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Her hands began to shake. If they took my name, I'd build a new one, brick by brick. The co-working space smelled like fresh paint and coffee grinds, humming with the kind of energy Morgan hadn't felt in weeks. It was early spring, but Portland still held on to the cold like an old grudge. The building Dean recommended was tucked between a vegan bakery and a failing bookstore. Two signs of either quiet genius or financial doom. She walked through the narrow hallways, past posters that read, "You are your work," and "Dare to launch." Every phrase felt both cliché and perfectly aimed. The room he'd offered was tiny, barely larger than a utility closet. But it had light, a window that faced east, and a door she could lock or open. Her choice. She pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. Mission statement, Everlyn Studio. Her fingers hesitated. Design with purpose, not ego. She typed it slowly, deliberately, as if each word were a seed she was planting into something greater. She thought of her grandmother, Everlyn, a woman who'd taught her that beauty meant nothing if it served only itself. The name wasn't just sentimental. It was defiant. A knock on the door startled her. Sasha, her former intern, peeked in, holding 2 coffees. "You didn't think I'd let you do this alone, did you?" Morgan smiled, surprised and oddly moved. "How did you know?" "I've been watching LinkedIn like a hawk. Saw you updated your title. Founder, Everlyn Studio." Sasha handed her the coffee. "If you're building something real, I want in." Morgan nodded, trying not to let the emotion crack her voice. "It'll be hard. We're nobodies now." "You mean we're finally free to do things right?" Later that week, Grace, her longtime friend and design school ally, arrived with her laptop and a tired grin. "You said you needed a logo?" She flipped her screen around. A tree growing through concrete. The roots cracked pavement. The branches touched glass towers. Morgan's breath hitched. "That's it." By the second week, the office walls were filled with sketches, models, sticky notes with potential project names. The heater barely worked and the internet lagged, but the space buzzed with something electric, something alive. Then, on a rainy Thursday, her phone rang. "This is the city office. We're calling to invite select independent firms to bid for the Green Library project. Submissions are due in 3 weeks. Would Everlyn be interested in pitching?" She stared at the phone, lips parting slightly. After a pause, she whispered to herself, "Let's build something they can't tear down." They say don't go to war unless you're ready to lose. I was ready. To lose my name, my past, my silence. April rain beat steady against the glass dome of Portland City Hall, the streets slick with tension. Inside the conference center, the air hummed, not with excitement, but with expectation. Everlyn Studios' name was on the short list, and that alone had stirred curiosity. Whispers floated like pollen in the foyer. "Is that the girl Carter kicked out? Didn't she used to run design for them?" Morgan stood behind the long table draped in gray linen, smoothing the edge of a blueprint with fingers that trembled only slightly. Sasha and Grace flanked her, quiet but alert. On the screen behind them, the Everlyn logo, the tree growing through concrete, glowed with quiet defiance. Across the room, Daniel Voss stood with his own team, arms folded, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than their projector. Morgan had seen his name on the competitor list, but seeing him in person, cool, composed, like this was his ground, turned her stomach. Then the projector flickered. Daniel's team went first. Slide 1. A green-roofed library wrapped in curved glass. Slide 2. A sanctuary of light and sustainability, where knowledge filters through space. Morgan froze. That phrase. That exact phrase. Slide 3. An exploded schematic of the water loop system. Flawed, she now recalled. A prototype she'd scrapped a year ago after emailing it to her father. A version never meant to leave her drafts folder. Sasha leaned in and whispered, He's using the March 2023 draft you sent Richard. I kept it, metadata and all. Morgan's hands tightened on the tablecloth. Her father sat in the back row, unmoving, his expression unreadable. When it was their turn, Morgan walked to the front as if on wires. Her voice held steady as she outlined Everlynn's mission. Design for people, not portfolios. The crowd nodded politely. Some even smiled. But Morgan could feel Daniel's smirk pressing into the back of her skull like a tack. Afterward, as the teams filtered toward the exit, she caught up with him in the hallway. You didn't just steal my ideas, she said, voice low, sharp. You stole who I used to be. Daniel turned, unbothered. You left the game. I just played better. His words were acid. Morgan wanted to scream, but instead she watched him walk away, already surrounded by city officials offering their cards. Then Sasha appeared, slipping a USB drive into Morgan's palm. He forgot one flaw, she whispered. Your old model had a filtration loop that was never fixed. If he builds that, the whole system fails. I didn't come to shame them. I came to make sure they never erased another woman like they erased me. May's sun spilled through the tall windows of the Portland Public Auditorium, casting long shadows across rows of suited officials and murmuring attendees. The final presentations for the Green Library project were about to begin, and the air thrummed with polished ambition. Reporters arranged their cameras with care, scanning for any reaction from the Carter family row, especially from the estranged daughter now returning under a new name. Morgan sat silently in the second row, Everlynn's presentation already uploaded, laser pointer resting cool against her palm. Sasha to her left, Dean Novak to her right. A quiet nod passed between them as the city council chair called Daniel Voss to the podium. Daniel walked on stage like he was accepting an award. Sleek slides flickered to life behind him. Solar angles, modular construction, water reclamation. His voice was confident, polished, sharp. The crowd leaned in. He smiled as though the job was already his. Then he finished with a line Morgan once typed in a hotel room at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling above her childhood bed. The Green Library will be a temple of knowledge where light and water work in harmony. Applause followed. Richard Carter sat in the front row, hands folded, betraying nothing. Morgan stood when her name was called. She adjusted the microphone. Good afternoon, she began. I'm Morgan Carter, founder of Everlyn Studio, and I'd like to start with a question. Not about buildings, but about belief. Her first slides didn't show blueprints. They showed community. A mother pushing a stroller past the proposed library site. Children reading under a tarp on a rainy sidewalk. A broken water fountain. My team believes design is not just about beauty or innovation, she said. It's about trust. If people enter your building and they're not safer, drier, or seen, it fails. Then came her model. Understated, rooted in real need. Her design filtered and stored rainwater using a tiered system visible to children and families. We want the library to teach sustainability, not just use it. She paused at the final slide. A simple sentence appeared. Design is not just about structure. It's about accountability. And then she turned. One more question, she said calmly. Has the review board verified the functionality of the filtration system on the previous proposal? The council chair blinked. It passed initial review, but initial isn't final, Morgan said. That model is based on an early draft. I know because I made it, and I never fixed the core loop error. Murmurs surged through the room. Dean rose silently and handed a folder to the chair. Inside, the original file, time-stamped, digitally signed with Richard Carter's initials in the corner. The chair frowned. A technical consultant was summoned. Sasha plugged in a laptop and ran the simulation. The animation failed, water spilling from the model's base. Gasps. Richard Carter stood slowly. His voice broke the hush. That design was hers. I approved it. A year ago. Daniel froze at the back of the stage. Then the press rose like a tide. Cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Daniel backed away, muttering, then turned and stormed off stage. Richard turned to Morgan, expression crumbling into something uncertain. But she was already walking away. They silenced her with an email. They stole her chair, her legacy, and the name she had spent a lifetime honoring. But what they underestimated was not her ability to fight, but her refusal to be forgotten. In a room full of industry giants and shadows from the past, Morgan Carter stood not as the daughter cast aside, but as the architect of a truth too precise to ignore. What began as betrayal became blueprint. With every lie exposed, every buried draft retrieved, every smirk from Daniel met with quiet composure, Morgan didn't just reclaim her space. She redesigned the rules. She didn't scream. She didn't break. She simply placed the facts on the table like steel beams locking into place. And when the system that had tried to erase her name was forced to speak it aloud, alongside an admission of theft, justice was no longer a concept. It was concrete. Because justice rarely arrives with fanfare. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks into the room calmly, holding a USB stick, asking a simple question that turns the tide of an entire industry. Sometimes, justice comes dressed in the silence of a daughter who no longer needs her father's approval to be undeniable. Daniel's exit wasn't just a fall from grace, it was a collapse of entitlement. Richard Carter's whispered admission wasn't just a confession, it was the sound of old power conceding to new truth. And as the press surged and headlines rolled, Morgan didn't pause to collect applause. She walked away, not in retreat, but in triumph. This story was never just about revenge. It was about memory, about making sure no one else would ever be erased in the same way. Because when women are pushed out of the rooms they helped build, some kick the door back in. Others, like Morgan, build a new room entirely, one with walls of transparency and windows wide enough to let everyone see what real accountability looks like. The lesson isn't subtle. It isn't poetic. It's simple. Never mistake silence for surrender. The moment you believe someone powerless is the moment you make your gravest miscalculation. For when injustice is met with precision and clarity, truth becomes the most unshakable foundation. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. And what does that mean for you? Sitting there, reading or listening. Perhaps you've been passed over. Perhaps someone took credit for your work. Perhaps you've been told to wait your turn, or worse, to stay quiet so others feel comfortable in their corruption. Don't. You don't need to roar, but you must refuse to vanish. Because justice doesn't always come from the courts. Sometimes it walks into City Hall in a tailored blazer and says, "Check the specs again." Let this story be a blueprint. For you, for your daughters, for anyone told they were too much, too emotional, too young, too late. Let it remind you that a name taken can be rebuilt. A legacy stolen can be reclaimed. And dignity, once buried, can rise with the steadiness of steel and the grace of sunlight through new glass. In the end, Morgan didn't need the Carter name to be remembered. She had something stronger. Proof. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but once it's heard, it echoes forever. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. No one builds something they can't tear down. Unless you do it with truth.